The Monster of Frankenstein. This is a part of a Marvel Essential series and a whole variety of different comics you get. Monster of Frankenstein 1 to 5, Frankenstein's Monster 6 to 18, as well as Giant Sized Werewolf, Monster Unleashed, and Legion of Monsters. 496 pages, and this book came out in 2004. You should be able to pick up copies reasonably priced, I would have thought. Obviously, it's out of print, so not always possible to get. However, this book is brilliant. Got great stories all the way through. There is also a colour version available. That's Monster of Frankenstein. I think that came about 2015. You should be able to pick up copies of that as well. Sadly, no omnibus edition, and I would love to see an omnibus edition of these stories. So let's just go through the book. Now, my copy's a bit brown. It's been obviously through the wars. And there you can see Monster of Frankenstein, and on to the various stories included. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't give a date of when the stories came out. It's really odd and not particularly useful. It gives the writers, pencilers, of course, Mike Ploog for most of the early stories. Then you've got Val Mayerick and many others, just looking there, John Buscema. But the books came out, the stories came out in 1973, I suppose all the way through to about 74. They also came out in the black and white magazines. Again, unfortunately, no actual dates there. So not particularly useful, unfortunately, in terms of information. Here's the cover, the first one, Monster of Frankenstein. And the stories initially were adaptation. Adaptation, of course, of the great Mary Shelley's book, back in where it was, 1818. And the stories are all obviously set that period for the first whatever. Obviously, it does change at a certain point, and I will show that when it actually happens. But the story, it's reasonable. However, I have no idea if this is an exact adaptation or not. I haven't read the book recently, so I can't really say. If you look through it, obviously you can see the story there. Artwork is excellent, of course. And you can see there. And it goes for a fair amount of story up to this point. Then it changes. Then we've got a monster walks among us. And, well, that is definitely the case. Of course, the variation is it's a werewolf this time. And so you've got, obviously, Frankenstein. Sometimes Frankenstein is talking, sometimes he doesn't. Some points of the story, it sounds like that he's never talked before, and he's thinking, I'm certain he has talked before. Or maybe we're just seeing his thought bubbles. I don't know. You've also got the story, You Are the Last of the Frankensteins. Storyline there, and there's a Along Came the Spider. When I first saw that, I thought, maybe Spider-Man pops up. Now, in the Monster of Frankenstein, the colour version, Marvel Team Up does actually have the stories with Spider-Man, but this sadly does not include those stories. I do not know why. I don't know if they were included in the Marvel Team Up. It's quite possible that they were, but I haven't got them, so I can't say. However, what we do get is Dracula. Dracula turns up. Now, this is obviously back in the day, probably 19th century Dracula. So he doesn't know about all the Hulk, various characters like Doctor Strange, because he turns around and says, you are the strongest character that I've ever met, which I guess probably was the case. That Frankenstein obviously was a pretty strong guy. Apparently he could lift about 4,000 pounds or something. So he's pretty strong. Though there are actually humans in this who are pretty big, and they clearly can battle with Frankenstein's monster. So I don't think they're really that strong, unless they've got superpowers, of course. One of the characters being this guy, who apparently can do pretty well against the Frankenstein's monster. Well, there's also a few other ones as well. There's a robot later on, and there's other characters that are pretty strong as well. You need that. No Hulk, unfortunately, so no Hulk turns up. But finally, we get to the modern age. How do we get to the modern age? Well, it's the good old story. This one's the werewolf story, giant werewolf story. The story does jump forward. How? Using the approach Captain America used. Back in the war, obviously the plane gets encased in ice, and that is it. And that's clearly what happens here. And no sort of like he wanders off into the wilderness kind of story. No, he actually gets frozen, and then see history goes through. Then you see a World War. Would have been nice if they'd included Captain America at that point in that little bit of storyline. But he is now in the modern day, and he's obviously got the werewolf by night and those sort of characters turning up, and also, of course, many other monsters as well to battle. Now, annoyingly, this only went up to issue 18. And the reason I say annoying, because unfortunately, there was obviously going to be another story. And then that was that. It didn't actually finish the storyline off. I don't know if it actually ever finished it off. Maybe it did it in the Marvel team-up stories. I don't really know. But you can see there, Frankenstein. But it's always a pity when a storyline just fails to continue. You think occasionally they make a little note and say, we must round that off, at least just finish that one story off. But no, it just suddenly stopped. Obviously, probably the series wasn't doing very well, and then they just decided. Here, we got the black and white magazines. There was a couple of stories, not many, a couple of stories in the black and white ones. And you got Frankenstein 1973, I think Frankenstein 1974, also later, John Buscema. And I love this. This is the reason why it would be nice to get the omnibus editions, just so you get the much better art, because this is slightly sort of smudgy, these quality ones. You can really tell the difference when you look at it, when it's obviously this been shrunk down a bit. Monsters Unleashed, you got there, of course, Man Thing on the cover. And again, you got the Frankenstein there. Now, Frankenstein does change and look slightly different at times. Of course, this is always the way. Doesn't change his clothing, so maybe doesn't get washed or anything. I don't know, those sort of things. But there he is. He's obviously met someone. He's wandering through. He meets the occasional person he has a bit of a natter with, and they normally end up having problems with. And of course, he gets shot at quite regularly. Seems to, even though I've done nothing to them, etc., etc. They wish to kill me, and of course he can still feel pain. So I guess he's got some issues there. And then we got Monsters Unleashed. Is she man or beast? Tigra, the werewoman stalks again. So obviously that probably wasn't the origin issue of Tigra, whatever. And there he is, invited to party. Obviously people don't realise that he is actually Frankenstein. He's wandering along. Obviously film, TV character, etc. And that is it. Run through of the monster of Frankenstein. As mentioned, would be lovely if they brought it out, and I thought they would in something like this. The Marvel Horror Lives Again. Really excellent volume. There's also another one just called Marvel Horror. I thought with Halloween they might have brought out a third volume. Now this is a few years ago, so I suspect maybe that isn't going to happen, but this has got a lot of different characters. You would think that also, not just Frankenstein, but many other characters also haven't been put into an omnibus, so that would be nice as well. Maybe a Lost Marvel. That's a possible, isn't it? Lost Marvel, because we've got that Lost Marvel recently. There's 3 volumes announced so far. Maybe this one will. But unfortunately, of course, it's not really lost when it's had a few reprints already. So maybe they won't think of that as a Lost Marvel. But it would be nice to see that collection as well as some other horror stories as well. So have you got that one? Have you got this Essential? Do you still buy Essentials? I mean, I quite often just pick up the odd Essentials, not all of them, generally ones that if I've got them already in omnibus or something, but there are a number of Essentials like this one that are not in omnibus format. And it's just nice to have obviously a collection of some great little stories in this Essential series, a series that I really, really liked. It was good, reasonably priced, and it was $16.99. That's quite decent for 496 odd pages, I think. Also, any thoughts about this? I say, have you read this one? Have you got any other Essentials? Please let me know in the comments below. A like or dislike, always great. Bye.